Film, television, commercials, new media. You are listening to Producer's Pal, unmasking the business of filmmaking and sharing killer advice from seasoned pros. And now your host, Joshua Brown.
Welcome to Producer's Pal, episode number 19. I'm Joshua Brown. Today on the podcast, Mike Tringe from Creator Up. This week's episode is brought to you by Indie Film Finance Guide. Learn more at producerspal.com/finance guide. To learn more about this episode, go to producerspal.com/creatorup. Okay, Mike Tringe of Creator Up, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Josh.
Very cool. Mike, I am super excited to have you because what you guys are doing at Creator Up is it's so in line with what I want Producer's Pal to be. Our title of Producer's Pal is Fund, Market, and Sell Your Film. And that's exactly what you guys are teaching, and I love that. It's you've got all sorts of product information on your website, but if you could just tell us a bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about Creator Up and just give us a broad overview.
Sure. So I think first and foremost, I'm a filmmaker and a storyteller and love that world. I taught filmmaking and worked on documentary in Morocco after graduating college. So I'm very much come at it from a, global perspective, and I just 5 years ago graduated from USC Film School.
Okay.
So while I was there, I discovered the joy of narrative filmmaking, and by that I mean producing.
Yeah.
So I really kind of got into the producing of projects while I was there. Some of my own short projects, but also those of my peers. And after graduating, worked in the entertainment industry at various companies, Creative Artists Agency, Buckaroo, Blip Networks, some on the more traditional film side, independent film finance and sales, some on the more, I guess you call it digital side. I don't like to say non-traditional side, because to me, digital media now is becoming much more traditional. So in my roles there was working primarily with producers, writers, actors, people who are creating content for the web, and helping them to do that, and realized at the end of the day I was just one man, and I could only have so many conversations over the phone, and really this e-learning platform was a way to scale that resource, to provide the best of the best information, experience, and experts to curate the knowledge that I think is really in a black box still.
Yeah.
And to open it up and make it available to the world.
Very cool. So I'm looking at your website here, and you've got all sorts of sections here. You've got different subheadings for kind of the areas that looks like you guys are focusing on for this point in time. You've got storytelling, which is obviously an important aspect of the filmmaking process, that maybe being the main vehicle for all this other stuff to happen. But you also have a section on producing and just the logistics of all that. You've got bits on marketing, and then also how to fund your movie, and then just I'm assuming the section called business. I'm assuming that's more about filmmaking for business. Is that right? Yeah,
it is actually. It's helping businesses tell their story, right? And the thing that I love about that is that they're really, in a lot of ways, everybody has their story, and there's no reason that a business can't share it on a daily basis in the same way that we learn from our own funny moments and serious moments. So
when you guys are designing these parts of the websites, are you pulling from your own personal knowledge? Like, are all of these tutorials then from Mike Tringe and your background? Or how are you guys doing this?
Not at all. In fact, I created some course content on there that stemmed from my experience. around digital distribution and monetization. But the whole point really is to create a network of knowledge, right? So we're asking and recruiting and developing this content with teachers who are top of the line, best in the business at what they do. So for example, with how to develop your web series, that course is taught by Mark Gant, who is a pioneer, in my opinion, in the independent web series production world, and ended up getting it distributed by Sony Crackle. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There are, however, some foundational knowledge that can really help you cut to the chase.
Yeah, really.
I think every day, in fact, the best producers are the ones that figure out new ways to do things at a low cost and make it look amazing. But what we hope to do is to make it more efficient in terms of how you do it. And I can guarantee you that if you have no place to start, you're going to need someplace.
Yeah. So tell us, at Producers Pal, we focus on sort of the breadth of indie filmmakers. Maybe you're just coming off of, or not coming off of, but you got started with DSLR filmmaking. You and your friends, your mom bought us a 7D, and you decided to make some movies with it. And you're getting older, and you're deciding, hey, I want to do this filmmaking thing, and you got to learn more about this, what you described as that black box. So who is your target market? Who are you hoping sees this stuff, and who are you designing this for to help the most?
I think to start out, it could be somebody who has a YouTube channel and wants to take it to the next level. It could also be an established filmmaker storyteller who's never, worked on anything digital before in their life. If you're starting with a DSLR camera and you want to make a movie, you can make a movie on a DSLR camera. The question is, how do you finance that and distribute it? The reason that we have focused more on the storyteller working in the digital world rather than the YouTuber working in the more elite, maybe traditional film world, is because we feel like the opportunity and the bar is low enough to where it's achievable. And we also feel that the future of the entertainment media world is moving in a direction where independent storytellers will be having more opportunities to work directly with brands, directly with advertisers, so that it's not about scrimping and scraping all the time. It's also about having relationships that build up your business as a storyteller.
Yeah. I was listening to a different podcast that actually gave me a shout out, so I'll give them a shout out. I think it was the Independent Movie Podcast or Independent Filmmaker Podcast. I forget the exact name of it, but I was listening to this and they were talking about how even Vince Gilligan from Breaking Bad wants to come back and do feature films. Like, that's one of his goals. And I just find it interesting that in this sort of new age of filmmaking, it seems that people need to be sort of diverse because everything's changing so fast. So if you your ultimate dream is to make feature films forever and be able to support yourself off of that, do you think it's a concession to work on YouTube or work in the digital medium? And how can someone who's maybe their dream is to have a feature film that reaches wide audience acceptance, how can somebody take that desire and passion and with your guys' products that you have create that audience for themselves online?
So I think that the short answer is it's absolutely not a concession. It's a building block, and in a lot of ways, I think you look at filmmakers like Kevin Smith, who stood up and bought his own movie at Sundance. I mean, the guy has a direct relationship with his audience, and that, in my opinion, should be and can be the future of filmmaking. And then you look at someone like Freddie Wong, who is on YouTube first and then can crowdfund his own movie in a day. I mean, how cool is that? So long story short, filmmakers are only empowering themselves by building up their audience online and storytelling online. That said, it is different. And
how so? What do you think?
Well, I mean, if you're going to be an online creator, there's a different skill set. There's a different practice. It's much more about, I would say, consistently creating.
Okay.
Whereas being a filmmaker, you can it's traditionally been punctuated by periods of 2 to 3 years before, you do another film. I mean, some filmmakers are extremely prolific and can do a feature film every year, or
right.
like Woody Allen, or I mean, they have a lot of resources behind them to be able to do that. So I think where I'm going with this is that I think today you're best served by understanding short form and long form.
Okay.
And digital fundamentally is a lot more short form, and the long form obviously is the feature.
Okay, so I see you guys have got a bunch of different courses up here. How to get to your first 10,000 views on YouTube, how to fundraise your film. What do you think is that core part? Because right now one of the things that is I think is really important in this digital age is finding, capturing, and giving your audience what they want.
Yes.
So what is it that you guys provide to do that? Because that's who you want to have an audience to actually see your film, and you want to give them what they want.
Well, I mean, it's okay. So there are two factors here. It's you, the artist, the story you want to tell, right? That I think is where you always have to start. And if you start making stuff just because somebody else wants to see that, then you're doing commercials, which is fine. But I think that the strategy needs to be to start with your story, or a story that you desperately want to tell, or something you're passionate about, and then finding the audience of that. Those things should work in concert. As an example, I recently had the pleasure of seeing a web series that just came out called Ask a Slave by A.Z. Dungy, who's now living in Los Angeles. But she had worked at Mount Vernon as an actress, pretending to be a slave, and sort of told a web series story about that process, which is very funny. But, had you talked to a studio executive and said, yeah, we have this concept, it's called Ask a Slave, it's about being, a slave on a plantation and modern ages, they probably would have been like, nah, that doesn't sound like anyone wants to watch that.
Right.
Well, I mean, her first episode now has over 500,000 views, and she launched it a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
So I mean, there's a story that she told very well. It was authentic. It was interesting. It was different. It was very much her. And it fit with a topic that people found compelling, that traditionally may not have been. I mean, there are historical elements. There are some feminist elements. There's some elements that are, I don't know, just unique. And that's cool.
Yeah. Very cool. And so you're saying it's not just about what that audience is, but first talking about what's coming from your heart, and then finding those people to connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. And to bring it all full circle in terms of the mechanics of it, if working in the digital world, yes, there are some best practices to follow. And going back to our courses and the marketing courses, they speak to that. You can't light a fire without a match. And so you've got to figure out how to kindle and get it started. So whether that's, finding those channels, those bloggers, people who support you, there's a methodology to it. And
Very cool. So let's say that there was a filmmaker who now wanted to begin growing his audience, begin to get his stories out there, and he went to Creator Up. What is the first thing that you would recommend he do to just begin understanding this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you should understand the way in which YouTube works. So I think that Matt Koval, who now works at YouTube, has a course on there called Building Subscribers. That'll give you some foundational knowledge in terms of the viewer, what kind of content works online.
Okay.
I also think Mark Gant's course around developing the web series, phenomenally insightful around audience and telling a story that you want to tell and audiences want to hear, which really touches on that theme. I think those two courses are great starting points. And then Dan Williams, who has a show on Hulu, teaches one of our screenwriting courses for the web. And it happens to be about sci-fi, but it's totally applicable to every other genre. If you took any one of the courses, you would gain some insight into the way in which that world can be accessed.
Very cool. Mike, when we first started the podcast, you talked about how you are first and foremost a filmmaker yourself. Mm-hmm. So do you still get to work on projects while you're working on Creator Up?
I have not had a chance to produce while I've been working on Creator Up, but as a matter of fact, so my co-founder Sarah and I, before we started Creator Up, we just wrapped on a short promotional film, which basically represents the world of The Miracle Mile. And The Miracle Mile story is directed by TJ Vulgari, but it's about a couple who moves into a hotel. It's a little bit of a horror thriller, but with very dramatic elements. And he's a musician and she's an actress, and this hotel is haunted by all the artistic failures of the past, and it really just is a very mythical story that TJ tells. So we did that right before, and it's really well done. I mean, not just because I produced it, but we're hoping that launches itself into feature sometime soon. So yes and no. Really focused on helping filmmakers on the digital side right now, but still a producer.
So I just kind of want to know a little bit more about you, because you've created this great platform now for filmmakers and even businesses to come and learn about filmmaking, the entire process from start to finish. And I'm just curious, what is it that brought you to filmmaking to begin with? And then what was that point where you decided to transition a little bit and you really felt the need to share?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, people say this all the time. I think it's so true. Filmmaking chooses you. You don't really choose it. Either you're really unhappy if you're not telling stories and you just have to do it, or that's all I can think of. Growing up, did something like strike you and you're like, oh, I have to be a filmmaker now, or like, what was that point? Do you know? Well, I think it's this thing where you feel like if you're not telling a story, and I guess you could say it's from when you're younger, but if you're not writing stuff down or putting it into a script or a screenplay or a feature short, that you feel silenced. And I really wanted to share my vision of the world with the people around me very, very badly. So the best feeling in the world for me is sitting in a theater, being able to share that and getting people's feedback after. And so I think everybody should have that opportunity, but for me it was just something that was a driving motivation.
Did you grow up in California?
No, I grew up in Holdrege, Nebraska, which is a really small town, watching movies at the Sun Theater and trawling through the DVDs or the VHS tapes in our local movie store. But you're digging deep now into my psychology, but I could tell you that was the outside world to me. Being in my town was like my life, and then movies.
You got your understanding from film.
Movies were the rest of it.
Very cool. And so was it that draw then that brought you out to California and USC, and then you decided I've got to do this?
I think that particular step was one that was a very difficult one in some ways, because I was pre-med. I had taken some time off to be a teacher in Morocco, and really worked on some of my own projects, writing a documentary. But at that time, I landed in Morocco on September the 6th of 2001, 5 days before 9/11. So it was a very tense time to be living in the Middle East, and I saw a real power dynamic that upset me quite a bit, which was the media portrayal of everything that was happening was just incredibly negative towards Americans, and Americans were seeing the same thing towards the Arab world. And here I was in the middle of all this trying to teach English.
Wow.
So it was like every day getting to class, and the kids were just nonstop talking about negative politics. And I was like, guys, there's so much more to the world than the events that are happening that seem so violent around you. Let's figure out how to tell your own story here. And I got the headmaster on board, and we started a filmmaking class. And
there it is.
The stories that these kids were telling, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is in your head. We need to get this out of your head so that other people can see it. And so that was a life-changing experience for me, where I had applied to business school and was enrolled, and then got into USC and said, all right, I'm going to do it. And I did it, and here I am.
Wow, cool. So earlier you talked about, again, how you're a filmmaker at heart, and then specifically you mentioned that it was producing that you did. Do you enjoy the producing, or you find that's a necessity?
I find it's a necessity, and I find a good producer is creative. I really love writing and directing, and if I could do it all day, I would. Producing to me, though, was really something fun. If you're working with people that you love and you're working on a project you love. I love finding. This sounds crazy, but I love finding locations. I love going to the space and like looking at it and talking to the owner and being like, "This is amazing. How can we craft a story into it?" Some people hate that part of it, but I think the parts that I don't like as much might be returns on the line producing side. Like, I don't know, just getting all the equipment back, making sure it's there. And then on the executive producing side, I mean, finding money is never easy. I thank God for crowdfunding.
I'm curious about that. Do you guys? I didn't get a full chance to look at your funding section. I know you have a thing about Kickstarter and how crowdsourcing is great, but do you have anybody who has spoken about getting traditional funding or maybe new ways to do a quote unquote traditional funding?
Not at the moment. We don't have that. Okay. I think it's something we'd love to build out. We certainly have a lot of interest in that. I know that Adam Leipzig is doing some really interesting things around that. If you know that name, he was the former president of National Geographic Films and had also worked for Disney before that. So I think he's doing a great job of really getting the word out in terms of how to do more traditional fundraising for documentaries, and hopefully we'll get a chance to work with him on a course so people can kind of watch it on demand for sure.
Yeah, that would be great. So Mike, what do you see yourself doing in the future, either with Creative Up or in filmmaking?
So, with Creator Up, I really see this opportunity to bring the power of storytelling to so many different segments of our population. And my hope and dream is that we're going to be able to do that as quickly as possible so that people's ability to tell their story is right at their fingertips. So I guess the answer to that is be working with everyone from filmmakers to bloggers to businesses to tell their stories in a way that they're proud of.
Yeah, and being that you are also a businessman and an entrepreneur, I'm assuming you have at least some understanding or knowledge of the book The E-Myth and how it talks about working on your business and not necessarily in your business. Do you find that you are specifically tied to your business, or are you going to be able to separate yourself from it so that you can create these tools that filmmakers can have and then continue to free yourself up for filmmaking and your passions?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's definitely the dream. I think that for better or worse, with startup culture and the thing that it takes, there is an immersive element to it. There's no question about it.
Oh yeah.
But I found myself, and I think this is true of most people when they hit a certain point of saturation, just kind of going back to writing as a way of self-sustaining and keeping my wits about me. So I think that the balance is the answer, and hopefully in the next 6 months, once things are kind of steady steady ship, I'll really be able to get back into that. And I know it's possible, just around the corner.
For sure. Yeah. And you guys are doing well. You're helping a lot of people already. You've partnered with so many great people already. I know you guys have got a lot going for you in the future.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your encouragement and your support. We really are excited about this.
Mm-hmm. So, Mike, what I want to do now is just begin to wrap up a little bit. We've talked about Creator Up. We've talked about you and your journey in this and how you're helping other people achieve their dreams. And what I want to do is just kind of ask you some fun personal questions just to kind of finish the interview out.
Sure.
Okay, so looking back and where you're at now, and then looking back to how you got here, is there something that you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
Yes, I think so. Well, I really loved working with the camera, and that was my passion in terms of like storytelling. And I think knowing what I know now, I would have taken control of the viewer experience and probably started getting my material out there digitally a lot earlier, creating my own domain, doing things that now seem so common sense, but 5 years ago may not have been.
So, and are you kind of saying that you would have maybe taken a bit more control of yourself as a brand?
I guess you could say that. I tend to think of it more as an insurance policy, right? I mean, you can give away your IP and you can distribute it and sell it and license it and do all these things. But I really believe if I had a deeper understanding, and maybe this is where Creator Up is coming from, if I had a deeper understanding of the power and the value of that control at an earlier stage in my career, I would have done it. And it wasn't emphasized, beyond the fact of like, make a reel.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so now you just said you got that advice of make a reel, but what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received as a filmmaker that you can share with us?
It's a good one. Well, I don't know if this is advice, but I think it's a life experience. And that is that if you have something that you think is great, then you can make it great. And I just was lucky enough to be able to sit on the desk of Brian Kavanaugh Jones while I was working at Creative Artists Agency and saw how hard a team worked to get Paranormal Activity from a slam dance screening into theaters across the nation. It was not natural or easy for that movie to be the hit that it was.
Yeah, it's interesting maybe that people don't understand that the hits, they are typically not a surprise. Like, it is hard work to get those in front of the right people and the right audience.
Well, that is right, and it takes a, where's Hillary Clinton coming in from? I don't know. It takes a village. You have to.
It takes a Hillary.
It takes a Hillary. You have to ally yourself with people who believe in you and your vision, and people might know that already, but I generally think that the curse and the what's the opposite of a curse?
the blessing, the reward. Yeah.
Thank you. The curse and the blessing that is the filmmaker's prerogative is their independent spirit. We have this vision and this story, and we're going to tell it, and we're going to tell it by ourselves, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah.
But man, you don't have a team. You're kind of downstream without a paddle.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so Mike, what is maybe one movie or TV show or YouTube channel that has you very excited right now? Maybe it's coming out soon or it just came out.
I think I already said it. I just love this Ask a Slave web series. I think it's so funny. I think it's very incisive and at the same time light. It's a hard tone to hit,
Yeah.
And I also love the fact that it's by a first-time creator, and then she's got 500,000 views on her first episode. I mean, that's so great.
Wow.
So I think that web series in particular, and films too, but have the ability to be cultural touchstones and really influence isn't the right word, but engage the people around us in ways that they're not thinking about otherwise.
Very cool. If you were on a desert island, what would be the one movie or TV show that you would have with you? You had to watch it over and over and over. It's your favorite.
Oh man.
Right?
This is the tough
hard
one.
This is the hard one right here.
Gosh. I would tell you all my favorites, but some of them are depressing, and I don't know that I could watch them over and over and over again. But, okay. Why don't we go with... I'll go with an old standby. I love Pedro Almodovar. I think he's phenomenal. And his movie Bad Education has so many layers to it. It's basically about a kid who's digging out the stories of the past as an older person, and realizing that the priest who molested him really is a bad person, and then getting revenge on that priest. And
wow.
It's just really dark and funny, and I just love the production design and the direction. It's just amazing.
I have not seen Bad Education. Just from that, I think I'm going to check it out, maybe even tonight if I have time.
Dude, you will love it. I mean, he doesn't, the way he tells stories is that he doesn't really give anything away. You never know what's around the corner. You probably have to watch it twice, but I saw that movie when it premiered at Telluride with Gail Garcia Bernal.
Wow.
And maybe that's the reason I love it so much, because I got to meet him and see Pedro and all that stuff. But it's
And you have
fantastic.
a connection with it now.
Yeah,
Very cool.
I do.
Very cool. Look, Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Where is the best place that people can go to find out more about you and Creator Up?
I think creatorup.com. Probably the number one spot. So send me an email if you have questions. It's Mike at Creator Up, and would love to help guide your journey towards your next project.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you so much to Mike Trench for coming on the podcast and telling us all about Creator Up. You can learn more about this podcast episode at producerspal.com/creatorup. This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Finance Guide. Learn more at producerspal.com/finance guide.